Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Amazon Ads Podcast. I'm your co-host, Andrew, here with the always impressive, very handsome, also single, Steven Knock.
Woo, woo, yeah.
What's going on?
Slide in my LinkedIn DMs out there if you're an eligible bachelorette. Just kidding.
Yeah, but today we're going to be talking about how to pick the right date range when optimizing your Amazon PPC. It's a question we get asked in our Discord pretty often that we wanted to address and help you figure out exactly what range you should be looking at when you're trying to make bid changes. So we're going to be diving into that today. Steven, how you doing?
Yeah.
What you got to say?
Good. And well, yeah, for those who don't know, our Discord is our free online kind of chat room for anybody who's in Amazon space to come and ask questions. Lately, it's been blowing up with questions. Andrew and I have been in there rapidly trying to respond to everybody. So if that sounds like value to you, definitely join the Discord. It's free. Link is in the podcast show notes. And actually, this topic on how to pick date ranges, we said we were going to record this episode a couple of episodes ago on the episode around why bidding automation doesn't work. And one of the main reasons for that is we were saying that these automations usually have a fixed date range, that they're a fixed look back window for making all the bid calculations, and they're not being adaptive with their date range selection, which is crucial to getting good results out of your bid management. So we said we were going to, when we did that episode, we said next week we're doing this topic, and then we forgot about it. So now we're finally doing it.
Yeah, we got too excited about revenue per click. Had to throw that one in there too. That's a hot topic one there too.
Yeah.
But we're coming back around. We'll get this date range one done.
Yeah, coming out the gates of 2024 with some really good topics that are overdue. So we got that going on. By now, the masterclass should be live, which is just our premium version of Amazon PPC training. So you can check that out as well if you're interested in. It's paid, so you got to pay for it. Full disclosure, it's not free. The content from the podcast is free, but if you're looking for something a little more distilled and really just down to the nuts and bolts, check that out. And then, of course, our bid optimizer, Ad Labs, is also, there's a free version of that that's out there and live and available in the video description.
Nice. Yeah. And for that masterclass, there should be a link down there. When you click that link, there's going to be a training there for you to watch so you can get kind of a feel for what types of stuff we're going to be going over in the masterclass. You can learn a little bit about it, see if it's for you, and then set up a call, and then we'll discuss and see if it's a good fit and something that you want to get ramped up in. So definitely check that out and set up a call with one of us.
And I think the plan is also to maybe put a couple of the shorter lessons on YouTube for free. Maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Did we want to do that?
I think we had discussed it a little bit, hadn't really came to a final conclusion, but I think it's fine.
If this video gets 100 likes, which is a very low bar because we're still starting out with this podcast, but if we get 100 likes on this video, we're dropping some free masterclass content on the YouTube. So make sure you're liking and subscribing. And with that, let's dive into today's topic of how to pick a date range when calculating bids. All right, so the question is, what date range should I use when picking my timeframes for downloading a bulk sheet because I'm going to be optimizing my bids? Usually is the case. Sometimes this also applies to harvesting keywords, those types of things. But most of the time it's when optimizing bids, people want to be knowing over what date range should I be making my optimizations. And usually the question is, should I be using last 7 days, last 14, last 30, last 60, last 90? And the answer, as with most of the time in these scenarios, is it depends, but don't worry, we can be a lot more specific than just leaving it at that. And I think the simplest answer, because we had, Andrew and I, before we were recording on this, we were thinking, okay, this could be another hour-long episode, but we can give people just like the short and sweet answer of this thing and keep this episode short because we probably have better audience retention with shorter episodes. But the short answer to what date range should I use is you want to pick a date range where the performance and the data within that time frame most accurately reflects what you think you will be experiencing in the short-term future. So in the next week or in the next 2 weeks, basically whatever you think those conversion rates are going to be during that time period. And that's usually what we're looking at. The primary thing is looking at conversion rate. So you want to pick a date range where the conversion rate within that time frame is pretty accurate, pretty relevant to what you think is going to be happening this next week. So if today's a Monday and I'm making these bid optimizations for the rest of this week, I want to be set up well for the rest of the week, I'm going to look back at multiple time frames. I'll look at the last 90 days, last 60 days, last 30, last 14. I'll be looking at different time frames, trying to identify trends. And in a moment here, we'll do a screen share where we can show you exactly what that would look like. In case if you're a visual learner and you want to see what do we mean when we say trends, like changes in my conversion rates or changes in my ACoS. Those are the trends we're going to be looking to identify that will help us determine what is the appropriate date range to use. And on time of recording, it's the second week of January, which is nice because we have some really big observable trends that shifted from immediately before Christmas versus immediately after Christmas. But given that we are now in the post-Christmas season, where conversion rates are quite a bit lower compared to the pre-Christmas season, obviously we're going to be wanting to use a shorter time frame that's looking back from around Christmas time to today, as opposed to trying to pull in all of November and all of December's data, where those conversion rates were inflated. All that kind of stuff is going to, if you were to use that data, that would be, a little overly optimistic, because what you're essentially assuming when you're doing these bid calculations, when you're assuming based off of the historical data that you're pulling in, you're assuming that the conversion rates will still be that same level of increased, inflated, whatever you want to call it. And unless if those conversion rates do continue, if they don't continue at that same elevation, then you're going to run into some issues of overbidding. The math with these calculations is going to result in overbidding on your CPC. So that's the short answer is you want to pick a date range where the data, i.e. the conversion rates, the revenue per click, are most likely to reflect what you expect to happen in the coming week. Make sense?
Yeah, beautifully said. I think that I don't have too much to add to that. That's pretty much exactly what we've kind of done over the past several years, and it works really well. I think, honestly, we should just jump into the screen share and show these people kind of what it would look like from a practical standpoint, and kind of see the trends shifting and see, how we're thinking through which date range we would select with an actual account. So maybe we could jump over to that and start showing, unless you have something else.
I definitely have some more, but we'll jump into the screen share first, and we'll come back and address those other points.
Let's do it.
All right, so right now I have one of my personal accounts pulled up where I have my conversion rate as well as my revenue per click being charted, so we can start looking to identify some of these trends.
Whoa, this is cool, man. What tool is this? I've never seen it before.
Oh, this is AdLabs beta. So we figured might as well screen share, because in the Amazon Ads console, we can't chart conversion rate, so it's a little bit more difficult to identify those trends as well as revenue per click. But these are the main things. Going back to that revenue per click episode, this is why revenue per click is so important for us. Is it's almost 1-for-1 correlated with your conversion rate. But of course, as you might recall from that episode, we also said revenue per click is conversion rate times average order value. So if you also throw in the average order value, you can see that fluctuates a little bit, which essentially explains why it's not 1-for-1 correlated. But just some fun facts for you. But what we're trying to do here, jokes aside, AdLabs aside, but we just figured it easy to screen share from here. What we're trying to look at is what major trends have changed. And right now, I think we're using we're looking at the last 60 days. You could do the last 90 days, whatever, but I'm usually going to be optimizing within 60 days or less. So we are looking at this account, looking to see any major trend changes. Now, like I said, it's going to be very easy to identify major trends because we're right after the holidays. So you can see starting December 23rd, conversion rate fell off a cliff, going from around 30% conversion rate all the way down to 20% conversion rate, and has continued to be on the decline. So that's one major shift here. And you can see that at that same point, ACoS started climbing up. So this would be an area in which we want to optimize. Now, we could also be a little bit more granular and something else too, depending on the size of your account, the more spend, the more total daily spend you're getting, the more total daily sales you're getting. Like this account, I think when we were looking at the spend, like on the peak days, we're spending like $5,000 a day, still generally spending a couple $1,000s a day. We did significantly pull back on that spend right after the holidays because we were actually anticipating these conversion rates to drop. So that's why we see the spend decrease so much, just being a little bit anticipatory. So that's something else to keep in mind with these with these date range selections. When you're going into, right after Christmas, and maybe you don't really have any data to pull on a bulk sheet from the last 30 or 60 days that most accurately reflects the conversion rates that you're going into, you can add in a little bit of a predictive element to those adjustments and kind of like undershoot. If you think your conversion rates are about to drop by 20%, you can just kind of, after you've done all those making your bid changes, you can just reduce them by an additional 20% is one workaround there. But the point that we're trying to get at here is in this account, because we have quite a bit, we have a large amount of daily volume happening, the day-to-day changes aren't going to be that drastic. But there may be sometimes we have a few accounts that we look at where the conversion rate is so weird, especially if you have a high AOV products that are selling for $50, $100 and up. The conversion rates day to day will swing from like you have like a 50% conversion rate to a 1% conversion rate, and it's really impossible. And so in those scenarios, you'd probably want to like switch back and forth between a daily view and a weekly view, and having a weekly view of those conversion rates will help smoothen out some of those changes in conversion rates and ACoS, because just on a day-to-day level, it's going to look jiggity-jaggedy. It's going to look like a key ring or something, like we're super jagged. I'm not sure what, that was a bad analogy, but
it kind of does look like a key. The teeth
it looks
of a key.
The teeth of a key. Yeah, that's what it was, the teeth. Whatever, I don't know what I said before.
Not the key ring.
Not the key ring, the teeth of a key, yeah. Super jagged. And so if you smooth it out by switching to a weekly view, which some views in the Amazon Ads console have that view. Otherwise, it's a little bit tougher to get to it. But obviously, this shouldn't be news for anybody. But you can also notice here that the ACoS and the conversion rate are kind of inversely correlated. So when conversion rate goes up, ACoS comes down. When conversion rate goes down, ACoS goes up. So all we're trying to do is, when I'm looking at this total time frame, if I were to optimize all of my bids right now based off of the last 60 days, which is going back all the way to November 13th, where we saw that these conversion rates were quite a bit elevated, see averaging at 23%, 23%, 25, 28% for 1 week, 28% for another week. And then if I look at the most recent week, which is where we're currently at in the middle of week 2 of the year, that's only 17% conversion rate. And during week 1 of January, we were also at like 18%. So currently we're at like a 17, 18% conversion rate. Whereas if I were to use this whole 60-day range where the conversion rate for that entire date range is 24%, that 24% is quite a bit higher compared to my 17, 18% that's been more average in more recent time. So, if I were to just assume, if I were to optimize based off of this data, as a manager, I'm kind of assuming conversion rates will stay around 24% going into the next week, which if we did do that, that would err on the side of us. The math would work out based off of all the systems we've taught you guys with how to calculate bids. The math would work out would be overshooting a little bit. So ideally, since I can see this trend right here, right around week 52 of basically the end of the year up through January, I can see I would like to use a shorter date range. Now, if conversion rate's been pretty steady for the last 60 days, then it's okay to use a larger date range. Part of the benefit of having those longer time frames is you just have a lot more clicks. You have a lot more data in there that's just going to give you a lot more what we call kind of click confidence or data confidence. That's just going to give you a better idea. And that's something that we also had mentioned on the episode. What was it? The sixth sense of PPC managers. We were talking about you need to know the difference between when you want kind of data like granularity and specificity, using really small data points to be very granular and specific, versus larger data points, which are a little bit more broad, a little bit more dependent on like overall averages and benchmarks. And you have a lot more confidence there. It's just not always super specific. So to think of it in terms of this chart, if I were to pick just this current week, for example, and it's only Friday. So if I were to only optimize based off of this week's data, that would only give me like 5 days really of data to optimize on. And that could be very granular and specific to the most recent trends, but I wouldn't be having as many clicks. And we can actually just see really quickly, like how many total clicks would that give me if we were only looking at Sunday through Thursday, we'll say, which is only 5 days. And my individual campaigns are all going to suffer from having a lot less individual clicks on them, right? 8 clicks on this one, 11 clicks. You just have a lot less total click data for any of your campaigns or any of your individual keywords. And so if you pick a date range that's really, really small, yes, you'll have better recency of data and better relevancy of data, but you're not going to have necessarily enough data. And if you pick a longer date range, you'll have a lot more data confidence, click confidence, but not necessarily a lot of data relevance or data recency. So our objective here is to find the sweet spot between kind of a balance between having highly relevant and recent data while also having sufficient data, a big enough data range to have enough clicks, enough data confidence so that you know that all of your calculations will work out well. You're not just ending up with a bunch of random kind of low like one-click keyword scenarios. So does that all kind of make sense so far, Andrew? Do you think I'm missing anything here?
No, I think that's good. I like that illustration of data confidence versus data relevance. So essentially, those longer time frames give us really high confidence in the data that we're looking at and the changes that would be made off of that data. But we may miss out on any shifts in the trends and not be as up to the times or relevant with the conversion rate changes that we're seeing. So got to make sure we're taking a broader look at overall how things are trending within the account over a period of time, picking out some of those sections or those date ranges where it looks like conversion rate has kind of been steady and is kind of forecasting probably something similar. You're expecting conversion rates right now to probably for this account to stay relatively the same. I mean, I know we talked a little bit before, and usually this account will see some sort of conversion rate pickup in January, which I'm sure you'll be ready for. But as of right now, if we were to look at that long date range, we might get like an average of both, the low conversion rate time and the high conversion rate time and fall somewhere in between, but ultimately still overshooting our targets for the most relevant time frame, which is right now and within the last 2 weeks that we're seeing here. So yeah, I think that's all really important and good points there. And yeah, I love that data confidence versus data relevance. And you got to find that balance and try to match that date range up with the next week or however frequently you're doing your optimizations, matching that up with that period that you're going into is going to help you dial those bids in a little bit more. Exactly.
Yeah. So I wouldn't want, just going to just the last 5 days. And that was one of the other questions that Andrew and I had put down on the some of our notes here as we were planning out this episode is some people say, should you never use data less than 7 days? Is that like the bare minimum you should always do?
Yeah, I saw that one on LinkedIn the other day. Somebody was talking about their strategy and they were like, you should never use less than 7 days of data. And I was like, never, really? I can think of several situations that we'll maybe get into later where we have had to use much less than 7 days of data, 1 day of data at times. And we could talk about maybe some of those potential use cases or why you might need those.
There's a lot of exceptions to almost everything that we say. There's always exceptional scenarios, and that's why part of what we're always trying to emphasize, both in the podcast as well as the masterclass, is we're always saying you have to think for yourself. Like, what we're really trying to do is not just teach you guys best practices of here's exactly the day range you should use. You should use 7 days or 14 days. Like, we're trying to help you think critically through how should you be thinking through your day range selection. So you can actually pick the right day range for you as we show you different things that we consider. We probably won't have time in this episode to get into all of those exceptions where we were optimizing based on like 2 days of data, like Andrew was just saying. But the final call out that I did want to say here is, when I was a minute ago when I was saying, what if I only looked at the last 5 days? We can actually extend it. Like at this point, now that we have data through like January 11th. From what I'm seeing on this trend chart, you can see that for the last 2 weeks and really even kind of the last 3 weeks, conversion rates have been relatively stable, or at least the trend has been like relatively flat. It's not significantly increasing or decreasing. And so in that case, we should be able to get at least 2 weeks of data in there. So I could look at like the last 14 days, for example, and probably would have pretty smooth line. Let's see after it loads. Yeah, pretty smooth line. It does drop a little bit, but like it's close enough that like I would feel comfortable using the last 2 weeks in this scenario. If you want to be a little bit even more recent and accurate, you could just start straight from January 1st, which often makes sense to me. Usually what I'm doing for my accounts anyways is after we get to around the midpoint of the month, I'm usually just using month to date data. That's like my preferred default, assuming that the month to date is at least like, almost, if it's around 2 weeks or at least 2 weeks, I'm usually going to be using month to date or somewhere like within the last 30 days, barring any weird things like Christmas or Prime Day. I'm going to be trying to exclude those dates, or at least factor them in somehow to my bid formulas. But Andrew, have you heard of the concept of recency bias?
Yeah, definitely. I've probably been a victim of it at times.
So
certainly have.
I've probably heard the term before, but I don't know. Recently, it struck me as like, oh, that's actually a really cool concept. Which a recency is bias does not apply to Amazon PPC, but I'm going to steal it. At least the terminology. Recency bias is basically that, like, in your mind, in your memory, like more recent events seem to be more important. It's kind of like, if there's like a recent global financial crisis, in our minds, that's more important than like the previous one, even though the previous one might have been bigger or greater, whatever. Is kind of a weird example.
I have an example.
Yeah, go for it.
I have an example for you that just kind of came up, and I actually noticed it. It was like a couple of days ago. I've been going through interviewing a bunch of people for a role, and interviewed probably 5-6 people in the same week. And I had some on Tuesday, some on Wednesday, some on Thursday, and then I got to the last one on Thursday. And like the interview went really good and things like that. But I just kind of noticed myself kind of gravitating to the most recent person. Their interview went well, but as I kind of went back through my notes from those earlier interviews on Tuesday, there was a couple people who stood out that, maybe were a better fit. So kind of found myself favoring the more recent one, and that's potentially recency bias kind of coming in there and skewing my perception and decision-making.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great example. But to not really be the exact same thing, the way in which I'm trying to apply recency bias is when I'm thinking through this in data, I'm thinking when you see these recent trends, it's okay to still in your date range selection. And that's really what you should be thinking about date range selection as. It's data selection. It's not just like your date range selection, it's data selection. You're sourcing your data that you are about to be using to create calculations. And so you want to have good data in there, right? Like garbage in, garbage out, as the idiom goes. So in order to make sure you have good data going into your bid calculations, that's point number one. And what you'll see here is, even though I was saying, week 52, these conversion rates kind of start coming down a little bit, it would be okay in my mind to actually optimize from December 24th on through the next 2 weeks. And I'll show you why. Because all I'm trying to do by shortening that date range, I'm applying essentially a bit more of a recency bias, if you want to think about it that way, where the conversion rates, because there's more days, more spend on the most recent 2 weeks, they're more heavily influencing the overall conversion rates here. So you can see, like, in the most recent weeks where we're at like 18, 17% conversion rates, we're pretty close when you total it all up for this whole period, getting around 19% conversion rate. We're pretty close to it. And so if I wanted to increase the recency bias to make sure that like all of the data that I'm totaling here is closer to the 17, 18% range, then I can actually determine, okay, maybe I should pick a slightly shorter day range. Maybe we'll go from the 28th through the 11th and see if that is applying enough like recency bias. Yeah, you can see that conversion rate's coming down. Now we're at like 18.5%. Now I might be okay with going with an 18.5% because even though week 2 is showing a little bit of a lower conversion rate, we do know that there's some sales attribution delays on Amazon. So that's going to be influencing some of those, why the conversion rate comes in a little bit below what it should look like. And so this might be an appropriate time frame to use, where we did have slightly higher conversion rates right towards the end of the year. I might be okay including that, especially if I do think, okay, we've had some slower conversion rates for the first 2 weeks, but I think things will be coming up a little bit in week 3 because we're kind of past the little bit of the lull to the start of the year. If I think my conversion rates next week are going to be around 18.5%, then this is a perfect date range that is reflecting around an 18.5% conversion. So it's a little bit of a blend of some weeks with higher conversion rate, some weeks with lower conversion rate. And in total, they are giving me I've got 18,000 clicks here, $21,000 in spend. I have quite a bit of data here. So I have that confidence. I have that data recency as well. It's really zoning in on the last couple of weeks is where most of the conversion rates are kind of leaning towards, right? I'm not, before I run these calculations, we're not going for an 18.5% conversion rate. We are doing 18.5%, not 20%. It's not as high as if I was just looking at that 1 week. It's a little bit of a blend of both. So that's basically just all the stuff you got to think through. Is you're playing with a few different date ranges. You're trying to find those trends in the conversion rates, trends in the revenue per click. You want to be, picking a date range that most likely reflects this next week, or whenever you're making these bid optimizations for however long you think you're going to need these to be in place, 1 week, 2 weeks, a couple days. That's basically, you're just trying to predict that and pick date range that reflects that.
Nice.
And that's basically
Well
it, I think. Yeah, I think that covers it. So
Yep.
I'll stop the screen share now, and we can just cover off on a couple of other additional points, maybe some questions that we've seen people ask. Like, Andrew, here's one that you put down there is, can I optimize more than once in the same week? And if so, like, does that influence the types of date ranges that I should be using if I'm optimizing 3-4 times a week daily? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, good question from whoever submitted that one. Essentially, I would say yes, you can optimize more than one time in the same week. And a lot of times I do actually do that on a pretty regular basis. So in general, I would say I'm running optimizations like on a weekly cadence. And then I'll push through those changes, and then we'll monitor how those changes are impacting the account throughout the next week. So let's say, for example, in your example that you gave, you were like kind of expecting conversion rates to start to kind of increase in that third week potentially. And maybe we went with that optimization and we actually were overshooting the mark and we didn't see those conversion rates start to come in and lift it all. So in that scenario, we may come back through a second time during the week and run a second wave of optimizations, looking at a shorter time frame, more highly relevant to the changes that we previously made, to try to pull things back and try to get it back on target. Any of those changes that we pushed a little bit too far, we can kind of rein in. So a lot of times I'll have at the start of the week be running some optimizations based on some of the previous data that we're seeing and trends that we're seeing, and then after those changes, I'm monitoring, seeing what happened, what changed, was there any fluctuations, what impacted those changes that we pushed through have, and then what types of troubleshooting can I do later in the week to help kind of offset any of those changes that we made that maybe weren't effective, or experiments we were running that maybe didn't go as well as they were planning to. So we kind of got to pull the reins back in. So I'll run those initial calculations kind of across the board, and then try to pinpoint, those poor performers, those high ACoS, high spend, not converting in a shorter date range. So that first optimization I may run with looking at 14, 7, 30-day time frame or something like that. And then on that second iteration, and sometimes I'll do this, is I'm basically looking at the date range between when I last ran the optimization and when I'm running it again. So I'm just looking at the specific data for that week. So say I ran it on Monday and I'm going to run a second optimization on Friday. I'm looking at that Monday to Friday date range to identify some of those things that are high spend, non converting, high ACoS, and I may run some bid decreases on those to help bring those back down into range.
Very nice. Yeah. The way in which I do it is Mondays are usually like the big optimization days for all my accounts, where we're pushing through a ton of big macro account wide changes. And then we come back, like Andrew was saying, you come back later in the week to see on one account, the objective was like push sales. The other account was like, let's cut ACoS. And then you come back midweek and you kind of see how that does. Are you now on target, or do you perhaps need to do a little bit more, or perhaps you overshot the target because you were expecting conversion rates to drop and you like really had to cut the ACoS down, and you actually saw that conversion rates didn't drop as bad, and now ACoS is under target and you actually have room to spend a little bit more. And so we'll come back in on like Wednesday or Thursday and we'll do what I started calling the midweek tweak, which you're just going to tweak things,
I like it.
Halfway through the week. Yeah. So you do your big changes on Monday. You monitor throughout the week. We don't like to do big changes on Fridays because you're going into the weekend. We try to rest a little bit. Yeah. So Mondays are kind of a good day to kick everything off with some big changes, and you monitor throughout the week, and then you might need to tweak a couple of things, usually smaller adjustments. Instead of doing the whole account optimizing it, we're just going through and taking, the top like 10% or bottom 10% and, adjusting those bids slightly to get them where they need to be. So your big changes once a week, and then your smaller round of changes during the midweek tweak. Sometimes things are just, a lot of the time actually, things are usually pretty good right after the Monday changes, and we don't have to do anything midweek outside of just monitor it. Yeah, not a big fan of daily optimizations. Yeah, you might have also answered this, Andrew, but part of why I don't like the daily optimizations is because it does make it kind of weird. Where like what people think you need to make daily optimizations because every single day is different. But if you are using a last 30-day time frame, and you're the only thing that's changed between yesterday and today is you have one more day of data. And if you're using a 30-day date range, like that one day isn't significant enough to influence the overall 30 days of performance, unless if you are optimizing based off of yesterday's data always, like you're always using a 1-day date range for optimizations, which I don't think is a good idea either.
Nope.
So yeah, I mean, I just like to do, one big change using the last like 7, 14, 30 days, somewhere in there, depending on the time frame and the trends that I'm seeing. And then for the midweek tweak, I might then do a shorter adjustment because it's only going to be like 10% of those keywords that kind of need some fine tuning. And for those ones, I might do a slightly shorter day range. If I saw more of the issues arose within the last adjustment that happened on Monday and now it's Thursday, I might do just the last 8 days to account for like kind of the last 4 days of data since the date range, we made those changes, but also include a few more extra days just to kind of keep with that data confidence. So for those ones, maybe do a slightly smaller day range, but yeah, I think that's covers it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the moral of the story here is that you have to be fluid in what date range you're selecting. It can't always be the same. Anybody who's telling you always or never do something within Amazon PPC, I wouldn't listen to those people because there's always some nuance, there's always some thought, there's always some specific situations that require a different approach. And so, yeah, you got to be able to be fluid and be able to think through all these different things that we've gone through and talked about to help you logically and do it yourself, think for yourself. I think that was part of the sixth sense as well, or one of those main things that we said PPC managers need to have is they need to be able to think through like
episode 1.
Okay, episode 1.
Top 5 principles, yeah.
You're much better at remembering what episode is what than I am.
At least the core episodes,
yeah. Yeah, so you got to be able to think for yourself and analyze your own account and your own data. Spend some time looking at different date ranges and identify those trends and see, what's going to work best for this round of optimizations. Not necessarily every single one has to be exactly the same.
Yep, that's it, guys. Just play with a few different day ranges. Look at what the conversion rates are doing. Look at daily conversion rates, weekly conversion rates, and pick a day range that makes sense. That in total for that day range, the conversion rate for that whole range and the trend and everything most likely reflects what's going to be happening in this next week when you're trying to optimize towards. And hopefully that makes sense. If not, happy to answer any questions. You can comment below this video. We've been responding to every single comment, definitely the questions. We've responded, I believe, to 100% of questions on our YouTube videos. So leave a comment, we'll answer there. Jump in the Discord. We're happy to have longer conversations there. And if you'd like to check out AdLabs, so you can do that same, day range, everything we were just checking it, that we were just showing on the screen share and, test out our bid optimizer. That's also available to you. Like I said, we got a free version, forever free, no time limits or anything like that. So definitely worth checking out. And other than that, I think that covers this episode. So we look forward to hearing you guys' questions.
That's it.
Yeah.
Make sure you like and subscribe. We need all the support we can get. 2024 is going to be a big year. We got some big goals.
Yes. And our subscriber count slowed down. So get back on it, guys.
Tell your friends.
Yeah. Share around. But yeah, we love you, everyone who has subscribed. 800 of you so far. So that's awesome. Thanks for helping us get there. And we'll see you guys next week on That Amazon Ads Podcast. Peace out.